Hello everyone, I'm Rajalakshmi from Department of Exercise Physiology and Nutrition. In this video, I'm going to talk about children and adolescents. I'm going to explain about how to design exercise program for children and adolescents, and I'll explain how they physiologically differ from adults and how they respond to exercise. Let's discuss. Children and adolescents. So before we discuss about physiological differences and exercise response, let's see why children are becoming very inactive these days, and why they are leading sedentary lifestyle, and how we can help them to meet the recommended level of physical activity. If you if you see, most of the children are physically active when they are in childhood, but when they grow, this physical activity level reduces due to various factors, and this decreased level of physical activity during childhood and adolescence tend to track as lower level of physical activity in adulthood. So normally, if they have the habit of being physically active during childhood, so they will continue that habit during adulthood also. So these findings provide evidence that children who adapt a physically active lifestyle may have a better chance of continuing this behavior later in life. So it is important to make them be physically active during childhood. And risk factors. So these risk factors can be modified through physical activity. There are some of the risk factors which they develop due to physical inactivity during adulthood. If they are not physically active during childhood, and they will develop these risk factors during adulthood. So first one is hypertension, obesity, impaired glucose tolerance, and sedentary behavior. And this can be modified by doing physical activity. And also, it is the research proven that kids, those who are very active, they have very positive influence on academic performance. So it's important to make them be physically active during childhood. Exercise response. So let's see how children respond to exercise and what happens when they do exercise. So children have a lower absolute oxygen uptake values compared with adults. So what is oxygen uptake? It is a measure of a person's ability to take in oxygen and deliver it to the working tissues. So it is the ability of working tissues to use oxygen. It is generally how your body uses oxygen and how much oxygen is consumed, and it is lower when comparing with adults. And children are also less economical than adults, resulting in greater relative oxygen consumption, especially during locomotor activities. So locomotor activities are walking, running, jumping, all kind of normal activities. And as I have mentioned in my previous class, when you do exercise, it has acute and long-term effects on your all your systems in your body. So it has effects on cardiorespiratory system also. So let's see how cardiorespiratory system responds to exercise for children. Children's stroke volume at submaximal and maximal exercise are lower than the adults, and their heart rate and maximum heart rate are generally higher than the adults at corresponding workloads. And cardiac output is slightly lower in children, and due to less CO, the systolic and diastolic blood pressure are lower in children. So these are the cardiorespiratory response. Now let's see their ventilatory response. So VE is lower in children than adults. So children have higher breathing frequency than adults. However, children tend not to breathe as deeply. So if you see, everyone, you would have observed children when they do exercise, they breathe. The breathing rate is higher, and they breathe faster, and it is very shallow. So they'll not breathe deeply, and children use less oxygen per breath, and which may be caused by a shorter ventilatory cycle as a result of higher breathing frequency. So they have higher breathing frequency. Okay. And thermoregulatory response. So thermoregulation is a process that allows your body to maintain its core internal temperature. So children have immature thermoregulatory systems. So not only thermoregulatory system, all the systems are not fully grown. So they have immature cardiorespiratory system and thermoregulatory systems. So they have higher threshold for sweating and lower perspiration rate than adults. So children, you have to, when you are training children, it shouldn't be like adults. So children must exercise in thermoneutral environments and be properly hydrated. So maybe you can train them indoors or under shade. So you should actually consider these things, this thermoregulatory response, and train them accordingly. And children will gain heat more quickly than the adults because of their greater surface area to body mass ratio. So normally, so they absorb, this heat increases in their body faster than adults. So this one particular point you have to consider when you are exercising them, especially outdoors. Okay. And exercise testing. So generally, adult guidelines for standard exercise testing apply to children and adolescents. So for example, if you want to test their agility, so normal T test you can administer for children. So for adults also you use the T test to measure their agility. That can be used for children also. So exercise testing protocol and mode of testing should be based on the reason the test is being performed and the functional capacity of the child or adolescents. So what type of test you are going to administer? One example is, are you going to do cardio training, a cardio test on treadmill or cycle? So this you have to decide based on your kids fitness level. Okay. And before administering test, you should think whether that test is necessary or not. And generally the important factor when you are doing exercise testing is children's, they'll not be ready, physically or psychologically, they'll not be ready. They are very immature. They need extra attention and they need more time, to learn basic skills and even a test. And it's not like adults, you do that and then next minute they'll be executing all the movement. So children, they need more attention. And aerobic prescription. So aerobic activity for children and adolescents. So they can actually do every day at least 60 minutes of physical activity. It is accumulation of either they can do morning 30 minutes and evening 30 minutes, but altogether they have to do at least 60 minutes of physical activity in a day, and at least they have to do 3 to 4 days per week, and preferably every day they have to do. Okay. The intensity can be moderate to vigorous, and the mode of activity is it should be appropriate for kids, because they are in the growing stage and they should enjoy. Generally, when you are involving kids for physical activity, what is the major goal? They should be physically active, right? So you can't be asking them to run for 30 minutes or 40 minutes continuously. So they should enjoy doing physical activity. Okay, so this all aerobic activity recommendations for children and adolescents. Next is strength training. So there is this debate is going on everywhere. If you ask a person, can we do strength training, resistance training for children? And some would say yes, and some would say no. But ACSM, they recommend that children and adolescents may safely participate in strength training. So they adapt and they respond to strength training. It is mainly as a result of neuromuscular adaptations. And resistance training, you can actually do the intensity can be 60 to 80% of estimated 1 RM, and repetitions can be 8 to 15 repetitions, and this applies to even general population, and sets 1 to 3 sets, and no more than 2 days per week. So here is an important guideline. You should not include strength training more than 2 days in a week time. So that's not the case when you are training adults. You can actually include 4 days, or every day also you can do if the intensity is very less for adults. And proper instruction should be given when you are training kids, when you are giving strength workout for children and adolescents, and supervision is needed. And they'll be able to properly execute the movement. And especially when you are using equipment that should fit, because there is no special equipment. If you have equipment for children, then maybe you can use that, but generally the height and the the weight of the, it will not fit for children and adolescents. So if you are not using proper equipment, it will lead to injury. Okay, so these are the general guidelines for children, strength training guidelines. Let's go to the next slide. Flexibility training. So you can actually include 3 days a week of flexibility training for children and adolescents. Preferably you can do flexibility workout every day. And stretching exercises should be a part of flexibility training, and you can emphasize on static stretching when you are training children, and targeting all the major muscles. So these are the generalized flexibility guidelines for children and adolescents. There are some special considerations when you are training them. So due to increasing prevalence of childhood obesity and decreasing level of daily physical activity in youth, children and adolescents may not be to achieve 60 minutes of everyday physical activity. Okay, so the recommended duration of physical activity for children is 60 minutes, every day they should do. So this you can actually increase the, if they are not able to meet this recommendation, you can slowly gradually increase this duration and intensity, and because that will avoid program dropout and injury. So if you suddenly ask your children to do 60 minutes of physical activity in a day, it will be too much for them if they are leading sedentary lifestyle. So we have to start gradually, and our major aim is decreasing sedentary behavior, right? So so you can actually make them advise them not to watch TV and surfing in, spending too much of time online, and playing games. So all these advices can be given, and that can be replaced by physical activity. So these are the generalized guidelines for children and adolescents. I hope you have at least basic knowledge of how to handle children and adolescents. So generally, children and adolescents, they should meet the recommended level of physical activity, that is 60 minutes per day. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you guys. See you in my next class. Thank you.